So if you haven't been to one of these before, it's not a webinar. You'll note you can see the other people involved. Well, the content you're going to hear today is from a living community of contributors. We've got 7,000 people in the community now, and the folks who contributed to the content on this were dozens, and they've been working for weeks. We're going to hear about containers and FinOps. We're going to hear about sustainability, unit economics, forecasting. All this work comes together to put outputs into FinOps.org, which is our open source framework with projects, best practices that you can all take and build on to further your practices. And the FinOps Foundation itself is a part of the Linux Foundation. It is a 501c6 nonprofit, and our mission is to advance the people who basically manage the value of cloud. And that could be, engineers who are doing FinOps. It could be procurement people. It could be, FinOps practitioners themselves. It's all the different personas who work together to do this discipline. And we do this through a few areas. So we work on community, creating connections. We also do a lot of work in career advancement, education, training, and best practices around areas like, oops, we got a little drawing on the screen. There we go. Things like the FinOps framework, areas, the playbooks that you can use to actually advance different parts of your practice and help your career. We're having all the Zoom issues today. There we go. So the group that supports this community is the FinOps staff. All of us work for the Linux Foundation full time. It's a great group of folks, growing quickly, actually, and we're looking to add more people. We love pulling people out of the community if they want to join a foundation as well. We've had a couple of great folks who are practitioners like Ashley, you're going to hear from later, Joe Daly, and others, who come in from the community. So thank you to all the staff for all the work they do. And we're going to spend about 10 minutes talking about some community highlights at the beginning of this. And these community highlights are really about the people again, right? So one of the programs we launched a few months ago was an ambassador program. And this is, for those of you who are here early, we had about 50 or 80 folks come in to network at the beginning. And the ambassadors are here to welcome you all into the community in their various areas. Tiago was sharing, he's doing this in Brazil. He's running a meetup there. These folks are helping to share not only best practices in the community, but just to make connections for folks, right? For networking, for soul searching, for all the things that we like to get together when we can. Some of these groups are WhatsApp groups, some of them are in-person meetups. So definitely look to reach out to these folks in our Slack. If you have questions, you want to get connected, they're all happy to help. And they're all volunteers. So thank you all for being a part of that program. So at FinOps X in June, which is our first in-person conference we were able to do in Texas, we had almost 500 of the community join us in person for a 2-day event. And we did a bunch of chalk talks where we worked through in groups, ideas and concepts. And Stacy, who we heard from in the pre-roll, who's our career advancement and director of professional development, new title, I got it now, did a chalk talk in this area, which came out with a great idea to do peer-to-peer mentoring groups. And these are groups of, small groups, 5 to 8 people who come together, could be geographically or on a specific topic to essentially share and learn and work together. So if you want to be a part of this pilot program, it's opening up real soon, starts in September. There is an email there, mentoring@finops.org, to find out more, and we'd love to get you involved with that. One of the other groups we started a few months ago was a Women in FinOps group. This is a group it's open to all, but it really focuses on how do we feature and raise up the voices of women in the community as well. And this group has done a fantastic job at starting a new event program, which is going to be featuring first Alex Head, who is that runs up the AWS Optics program. You may know Steph Gooch, who's been in the community. She works for Alex as well. Alex has a really inspiring story and has done really great work in the field and has built a great team there. So really looking forward to hearing her story. Everybody's welcome to join and contribute. And there's also a Slack channel there if you want to join, which is sig-women-FinOps. A few months back, this is just like the running joke. It was happening in the pre-roll too. The FinOps podcast launched. I called it Oddly Good. Joe Daly on our team who runs it kind of took offense, but I think in a good way. But I highly encourage you to check this out. On these summits, we're going to cover a ton of content. I'm going to throw so much stuff at you in the next 10 minutes, and then a bunch of other people are going to do that as well. You're going to hear from 15, 20 people. We don't get to go as deep as we do in the podcast. So Joe's done a great job of having these 30-minute conversations, sometimes a little longer, sometimes less, that dig not only into the practices that these people are running, but also their own stories, how they got into FinOps, the challenges they're doing. There's a personal element, and there's also deep best practices. If you look at that episode 6, Jason Rhodes from Intuit went well into the weeds about their allocation tagging strategy, deeper than we can on these summits. So definitely check those out. They're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all those places. Great for hiking or driving anytime you want to listen to something. I mentioned earlier, I was working on the Cloud FinOps book over the summer break, or over my summer break, which was actually a working writing book break. But excited to move this forward. We're adding almost 150 additional pages. We go from 250 pages to 400. There's 7 new chapters. A lot has changed in the world of FinOps since we started working on the book in 2018, 2019. Things like savings plans at AWS weren't out yet. A lot of the way that we have continued pushing forward the best practices through the foundation weren't really incorporated in there. There wasn't a good model in there to how to think about engineering enablement and action. There wasn't a good model in there to how to think about forecasting. Sustainability wasn't a part of it. A lot of things you're hearing about. So these are all going to be new chapters in there. Thank you for so many of you. There's too many to mention. I think 75 folks have contributed to this so far. And my co-author, Mike Fuller, lives in Australia, and he got up at 4 a.m. for 3 straight weeks to work on this in July with me, which was amazing. And I want to give him an extra special shout out, because Mike is probably the most impactful contributor that our community has had. He's volunteered since 2019 in almost every position the foundation has volunteering positions for. He's helped really define how we run our organization. He's contributed, 2 working groups. He's, kind of just been a tireless ambassador. So I added this yesterday because Mike is unfortunately in a time zone that makes it hard for him to join these summits, and he doesn't get enough, I think, recognition and credit. So thank you, Mike, for all that you do. So the foundation now has a FinOps for Enterprise program as well. We've had a few interesting companies join that. This is about how do we help the enterprise and the individuals push forward their practice? How do we help them build their teams? How do we help them, adopt FinOps and get motion, visibility, hiring, all those areas, help them get training? It's a really interesting program. The first one that joined a few months back was Apple. They shared their story on one of these summits. We've recently had JPMorgan Chase, Fidelity, and AIA join. Thank you to all of them for supporting the community and giving back. They're contributing, they're speaking, they're putting in working groups best practices and spreading the message. The newest one, which unfortunately Keith wasn't able to join today, but Keith from AIA is going to be joining our governing board as part of this program to help drive the future of the foundation. AIA, if you don't know it, it's the biggest insurance company in Asia. They have something like $360 billion US of assets under management. So it's been around for 100 years, and they're in the middle of a massive cloud migration. Keith will share that story next month, but taking a bunch of on-prem resources and aggressively moving to cloud. So we're excited to have him and their learnings as part of this journey. Now, I mentioned Keith is joining the governing board. A little bit on the structure of the foundation. This group is a mix of folks of practitioners ranging from AIA I mentioned to Apple to Atlassian to Chevron to HSBC, as well as a representation of some of the most advanced consulting firms out there doing the work of FinOps and platforms. So these groups come together to essentially define where the foundation is going. We're all actually going to be meeting up in October, not only to talk about the future of the foundation, but also the future of FinOps itself, where the industry is going in the next 12, 24, 36 months, so that the foundation can better support the community as part of that. Okay, time check. Wow, I'm a minute early. Excellent. Looking at Steve Trask there. He's nodding. He's my timekeeper. Yes, thank you, Steve. On the 20th, it's International FinOps Day, and somebody is drawing on the screen. Let's see what's happening here. 1 second. All the Zoom issues today. All right, there we go. So International FinOps Day, you can Google it. It is actually a thing, says the internet. We're excited. It's a day that we are every year trying to spread the message of the work that you all are doing. We are, as part of this, giving a discount code for training and certification offerings that we have. It's a big way the foundation supports its efforts to drive the community and the best practices and all those things. So if you want to get FinOps certified, definitely check out learn.finops.org. Helps us, and there's a discount code for that right there. The other way the foundation supports itself is by memberships from other vendor partners. Some of those folks I mentioned earlier, these folks contribute to the financially to the foundation, but they also come in with a strict no sales pitch code of conduct and a requirement for them to be engaged and embedded into working groups to share best practices, vendor neutral best practices that benefit the entire organization and industry. So thank you to our premier partners, Cloud Health, Google Cloud, SADA, Deloitte, Accenture, Verticent, Cloudability, McKinsey and Company, NordCloud, SoftwareOne, Tencent, Spot, Turbonomic, HCL, Flexera, QCost, Ternary, and CloudFix, the newest one. CloudFix we'll hear from in the coming month as well. We've also got a long list of fantastic general partners that represent some consulting agencies, some platforms, some focused, GSIs. These folks are all also in the community under a strict no sales pitches code of conduct, helping, contributing, and being there to answer vendor neutral questions. We do have the only place these folks are allowed to be sales pitchy. They have their own dedicated rooms in the Slack that's just for them, each one. So if you go into that room, we'll post information. It's basically a CloudSoft dash, a vendor or any of these dash vendor. You can check that out. But generally, they're in the rooms, sharing best practices, et cetera. The fun and legal obligatory bits, because we have a lot of industry participation, competitors, all the things, we do have an antitrust policy that we need everyone to follow. You can read the details there on the Linux Foundation. The gist is, not to participate in any activities that are prohibited under law, such as sharing confidential information or coordinating between competitors to be anti-competitive, et cetera. All right, so with that, we're going to get into a round of lightning introductions from some of the new folks who have joined. We're going to ask you to unmute. We're going to start here with Donnie Cross from Rackspace Technologies. And Donnie, we're going to give you a 30-second timer, so we keep everybody on time here. Can you hear us, Donnie?
Yeah, just fine. Thanks, JR.
Perfect. Great. Welcome. Oops.
Right. Go ahead. So really quick, Rackspace is a multi-billion-dollar organization operating in multiple countries. We specialize in providing multi-cloud services at scale. We, in the public sector, right, the hyperscalers, we started a FinOps practice back in 2017. So we're super excited to join the FinOps Foundation, to participate and contribute to the community. And really, our goal is to really help accelerate the competency and adoption of FinOps practices for all.
Awesome. Nailed the timing. Thanks, Donnie. Great to have you in the foundation. Hassan Hosseini, are you on from InfraCost?
Hey, folks. Yep. Hey, JR.
Hey.
So, hey, everyone. I'm Hassan. I'm one of the co-founders of InfraCost. So InfraCost is an open source tool that kind of sits in the engineering workflow and tells engineers how their code changes are going to affect cloud costs. So fit into CI/CD and things like that. So it's kind of making cloud costs more proactive, making sure people know, the engineers know how much these changes will impact the costs.
Great.
Good to be here.
Thanks, Hassan. 3 seconds early. Love it. Welcome. And Andy from Fairwinds, are you there?
I'm here. Hi, all. I'm Andy. I'm the CTO at Fairwinds. Our governance platform allows teams to optimize Kubernetes costs. So we specifically work in Kubernetes. We provide workload cost allocation, right-sizing advice, multi-cluster costs, cloud billing integrations, and lots of different options for governance and enforcing standards in your Kubernetes clusters. We also provide a lot of open source in the Kubernetes space, and we help FinOps teams get one view into Kubernetes costs and the ability to eliminate wasted compute.
And you have like the best microphone setup on the call, so that's also a bonus. Welcome, Andy.
Thanks.
Great. So each month we feature one of these premier vendor partners that we have. And as per usual, we ask them to share best practices, share their view on the industry. So this time around, this month's sponsor is IBM Turbonomic. And very glad we have Kevin Lamb, who's product manager there, to share their view. He's going to talk a bit about automation and how to enable it in the organization. Kevin, you ready to go?
I am. Thanks,
Perfect.
JR. Hey, everyone. As JR mentioned, right, Kevin Lamb, product manager. First and foremost, I think this organization community is fantastic, especially the time boxes that we're doing. I think it's fantastic moving along. So we can go to the next slide. All right, right. So I'll spend the next few minutes talking about automation, right, and how that fits into the FinOps space. I'm sure this is familiar with everyone, FinOps from a definition, but I just wanted to pull out a couple of key words here and why automation specifically is so key to FinOps best practices. So evolving is one thing. As JR mentioned, right, we're in the cloud services space where we continually see adoption of new services, whether it's Kubernetes, cloud native technologies. It's constantly evolving. And so in order to keep track and keep pace with these new opportunities, we need to enable automation. It's really beyond human scale. So automation is a critical piece of that. Second keyword, right, is maximizing business value. It's not a one and done when you think about FinOps, but in the definition itself is by maximizing business value to, meaning let's automate or take action in an environment, not only observe and set up a visualization or observability of your spend, but by impacting and executing on those business values by taking action. Of course, when we think about this definition of FinOps, we also put it in context of the application. So when we think of applications, not only cloud, but also on-prem, off-prem, multiple clouds, cloud native, what have you. So that's the lens that we look at it, an application anywhere, anytime, across any cloud. So if we go to the next slide. This is probably familiar with a number of you folks, right? This was coming out of the challenges of the state of FinOps 2022. And specifically, I'm going to zero into that purple square, right? 20% of those surveyed said that enabling automation was a key challenge. Now, before even drilling into this one, if you look to the left, the number one challenge, which we view from a best practices standpoint as a precursor to any automation, before you flip on the switch to automate, you need to get buy-in, right? You need to get buy-in from the application folks, from the operations team. And so really, when we look at these two together, it's critical in order to drive automation by first getting trust and visibility and alignment of all of those different stakeholders. And so in combination, when we think about the challenge is more than just 20%. It's really 50% when you think about the combination of those two, when we put those together. And that's really what we see, is that from a best practice standpoint, before even getting to the second step of automation, it's ensuring that from an engineering perspective and development, you get buy-in in order to do so. And so what are those barriers, right? That's the question. So on the next slide, we will look at the quick barriers, right? You can see them on the screen, but I want to double click specifically on the first two. And so what we observe is that from an alignment perspective, that's probably the number one thing. When you think about internally, right, at IBM Turbonomic, we have hundreds, thousands of different developers that are all isolated and working on their particular project, their new feature, what have you. And when we think about an application owner or developer, they're considering and they care about, how do I deliver more quickly, deliver on the new features that I'm tasked with, and ensuring that nothing bad happens, right? That's what they care about. That's really all they care about. And so how do we align those goals with the business goals? How do we deliver those products for different users, enhancing our number of customers, ensuring better satisfaction for those customers? And then also from an operations standpoint, how do we ensure that our costs aren't exploding? And so when you think about, just as a starting point, what are the goals of each one of those individuals? They're potentially in conflict with one another. So when we do automate, the last thing that we want to do is break things. And so if you break things, you're now in a worse place than where you started. Not only are you back to square one, you're actually in a deeper hole than where you were because people are going to be suspect of any changes that you're going to make in an environment. And so that's really the key barrier here. So how do you overcome it, right? And so that's really the next slide here, where we're going to go through three of the topics or areas to overcome or jump over these barriers here. So I highlighted the challenges. Let's talk about some of the opportunities, or how to provide best practices for automation. So real quick, right, the three that we see here are technology. So how do we align across the different groups, applications, DevOps, operations? One is technology. So looking at connections for an RDS server, looking at CPU throttling for Kubernetes clusters. That's first and foremost, getting different data points for the different stakeholders, so that when we do automate, we're doing so within context of one another. Second, our organizational process, looking at not only just providing automation in terms of deployment of a new application, but the ongoing CI/CD pipeline, looking at things like GitOps, Terraform, et cetera. So when we talk about automation, it has to integrate and map to the organizational process of deploying of those applications on an ongoing basis. So that's another key point. Last is trust. That's probably the most critical piece here. That's going to be a prerequisite to any automation. And one aspect is trust, is understanding policies, compliance rules, et cetera. So if I have an AMI, understanding the constraints, if I have licensing constraints for a particular operating system, taking that into account when automating. So again, those are three pieces of the puzzle that drive the best practices. Next is the last slide here, which is the journey. We adopted this from the FinOps adoption working group and specific to automation. So it starts with getting that data, trusting the decision, and then taking action. So as I mentioned before, it's not only just observing what exists in the environment, but actually taking action. Typically what we see are implementing actions for a development environment, a small environment, something that can be suspended, or executing on low-hanging fruit. Next is taking an action that can be reversed. So if we take an action, let's do so that's non-disruptive and can be reversed. And the last piece is, how do we do so on an ongoing basis? And the last thing I'll leave you with is measuring the outcomes of the automation. So it's not only just reducing our spend, but one thing that we've been doing internally is thinking about, when taking action and automating, looking at another outcome, which is, by delivering better performance or by automating this process, can we deliver better customer satisfaction scores? So there's an other side of the coin. It's not only can we exclusively look at saving money, but rather can we actually drive automations from a FinOps perspective that ties to the business? Meaning, let's track NPM scores after automating, before automating, and after automating. So that's it. I wanted to just do a couple of minutes here highlighting best practices, not only the challenges with automation. As you can see here, right, join us in the main breakout. We are part of the automation working group. There's a survey that's been ongoing, and we're going to compile that data and send it out shortly, as well as continuing to provide videos and content for the automation working group.
When vendors join, they plug into working groups with other vendors, with other practitioners, with a mix of all the different people in the community. So you can definitely check them out in the Automation One or their room, which is the Turbonomic room there, which is in the Slack. So this gets us to the really, I think, interesting part of the day, which is, how do we pull the best contributions out of the best minds of the community to help everyone else? The group that is sort of the keepers of the vision for this and ultimately vet the best practices and standards that come out of these working groups is called our Technical Advisory Council. It's designed to be made up of a mix of practitioners, consultants, and platforms who come together to agree these best practices that are floated up by the working groups. And that's really the focus of the content today, is the output of 4 of these working groups that have been going. So big shout out to all the work the Technical Advisory Council does. And this is a group that does have some elections coming up as well. It is designed to be a small group that is a mix of personas. So if you're interested in doing this, and are someone who is at a run stage and has run a large cloud spend FinOps practice before, definitely consider putting your hand up when the elections come in a couple months. And with that, I'm going to pass over to Ashley Ramotko on our team, who is a director who runs our FinOps Enterprise program, and she also is a former practitioner. She was doing FinOps at Pearson for a number of years and happily joined the FinOps Foundation to help lead a lot of our efforts here. Ashley, over to you.
Perfect, thanks. Just double checking you all can see my slides up.
Yeah.
Yes, we see working group updates.
Awesome, that's it. So we're going to do working groups updates. I'm just telling you a little bit about working groups. So they are community volunteer based. So we have these individuals that will join either weekly calls or bi-monthly calls. And really what they're focused on is codifying best practices and launching open source project content. Being a formal practitioner, I love working groups. And there's 2 reasons why that. One, you get to come an hour a week and hang out with people across the globe in different industries, and you kind of get to geek out about FinOps, which is fantastic. The other reason I love them is because we're putting out output of best practices or recommendations, or here are 5 different ways that you may want to solve this one problem. And what I love about that is, so the next generation or the next folks that are coming into the foundation, they're always having materials to start with instead of feeling like they're alone trying to figure this out. So very, very powerful. And these are open to all community members as well. So please keep that in mind. So diving right into it, we're going to start with the working group forecast. I'm going to go ahead and want to introduce quickly who's part of this group. So we've had several members, kind of a core team that has gotten together since April. They really is quite inspiring because they all come from different backgrounds. We've got Jerry that comes from the government. We've got Allison that's coming from banks. We've got Amanda that does a lot of consulting in this area. And so what they've been able to do is come together and discuss their different techniques and put together a survey out to the community, which I'll get to in a minute. But I want to hand it over to Allison McIntyre from Lloyds Bank to share what the working group put together as a proposal that was approved then by the TAC and the F2 staff to move forward with.
Thanks, Ashley.
Hi, Allison.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alison McIntyre. I'm the working group lead for the forecasting working group. I was really pleased when Kevin put up that that block view from the state of FinOps, and those that were paying attention to it would have seen that the second largest at 29% was accurate forecasting. And that's kind of what kicked off our need for, or our perceived need for, a working group. Our goal, our aim, what we're all about is creating collateral that we aspire that would help everybody, whether you're even at run state or you're at pre-crawl. At every step along the way, we hope to have at least a nugget that might be helpful, might help you avoid a pitfall or get there faster. This will likely come in the form of a playbook. We're about to go into sprint 3. We're just closing out sprint 2, which was all about reviewing the survey. Ashley's going to go through that in a bit of detail, and we've got a few slides on that to let you see what the responses look like. So there's some quite interesting ones in there. But that's kind of our main aim, to get collateral out into the hands of the community that's useful. We'll go on to the next one.
I think just to kind of start out, we talk about forecasting. What we started realizing is like there's a lot of different types of forecasting. So we thought it'd be good to kind of level set with the community what we're finding here. So FinOps teams are really being asked to engage very early on and when business cases are being created. This could be reviewing a first-time estimate for something that's going to be cloud native. This could be a large bulk data center migration. We're seeing that FinOps teams are being embedded very early on in those discussions. Another common forecasting is annual planning. It's probably the one we're the most familiar with. This really sets the tone for budgets. And so we've been discovering through conversations and surveys that this is important to get right and understand the impact that doing forecasts sets the whole company up for the budget. This also tends to be a big consolidated effort with finance. We learned that a lot of practitioners are also doing reforecasting. They're either doing that because it aligns with financial planning cycles where they're being asked, that's great that you gave me annually, but I need a quarterly one. I need I need one middle of the year as well. What I found is interesting is people are actually taking this reforecasting on proactively and saying, I want to do this because I'm seeing trends that don't seem right. I'm seeing things go over. I'm seeing things significantly under. I'm going to trigger our reforecast and figure out what's going on. I find that super fascinating. And lastly, FinOps teams have been heavily involved in the long-term commitment planning, which really looks like a combination of all of this. So it's reforecasting, bringing in new business cases, bringing in the annual and being able to project it 3, 4, 5 years out so you can do those long-term commitments with your vendors. Please let us know if there's other types that we've missed, but I think this was kind of just a fascinating output that we really need to say, what are you talking about when you say forecasting? Because there's many different types. So let's dive a little bit more into this. So this working group worked together to put 14 excellent questions together, and they pushed that survey out to the community, and we received about 49 responses. And the goal was just to take what we already knew from the State of FinOps survey and dive a little bit deeper into that. And we wanted to look at it through the lens of maturity. And so the group also defined these 4 levels of maturity while they did this. I'm going to hand it back over to Kate, Amanda, and Allison so they can go through these results with you all. Kick us off, Kate.
Thank you, Ashley. So Ashley outlined what the different types of forecasts are, but I want to talk about why people do forecasts. So we put in 3 options in the survey where people could choose 1 or 3 or enter their own option in an other text box. And really the key highlights here are that the most popular reasons are because it's part of the budget process or to provide those numbers at the organizational level. And that was really popular with the crawl and pre-crawl. So if you're just starting out, one takeaway would be maybe that's the place to start. Try to tie your forecast to the budget because everyone cares about their budget. Another interesting takeaway that I had here after looking at the data is that the runners actually responded. They selected each of the 3 options, and most of them often had other reasons why they were doing a forecast. So as you mature through your FinOps evolution, all of these will most likely become a reason for doing a forecast at some point. I'll turn it over to Amanda now.
All right, so this slide looks at the time period of the forecast by maturity. And so first and foremost, it's really unsurprising to see the majority fall into that 1-year period, as that follows the typical fiscal or calendar year model for organizations. But I do want to point out the widespread of periods for all of our maturities, because I think this is indicative that regardless of maturity maturity, folks are going to forecast what works for their organizations and industries. And lastly, I do just want to point out those 3 year and 5 years, because I find those really important, really interesting, because I do think it requires a little bit of extra finagling when you're putting something together that far in advance. So those 3 year responses are most likely some folks who have enterprise agreements. And if I had to guess, that 5 year response is probably from our public sector, where they're required to do that 5 year forecasting and budgeting in advance. But bottom line, key takeaway, I think, is do what makes sense for your organization in this area. And then moving on to our next one, I think, yep, we've got that forecasting accuracy compared to actuals. So this is really interesting because you can actually see a wide spread of maturity across those 3 variances. So traditionally, one of the key forecasting maturity metrics has been variance. But here we've got our runners and walkers and crawlers spreading across almost all 3. So there's a couple reasons, I think, for this. One being, despite the variance, it's because their spend might be smaller, so they're not as concerned if the variance is larger. Or probably also an option can be that they're doing a different metric or threshold, such as revenue. So maybe if you have a 20% variance or higher, you're not concerned with it, because you have the matching revenue or widget purchase to go along with that, or lack thereof. So I think this is really interesting, and I would love to get more folks to take the survey so we can even dive into this data point a little bit more, since we see this widespread of variance across the maturity. Over to you, Allison.
Thank you. So this was one of our other key things. At what level do you, or the granularity, do you forecast at? You know, are you just saying, for Azure, we're planning on spending X? Or are you saying, within my business area, I'm planning on spending Y? Or do you actually go down to the account or the project or the subscription level? It's another one of horses for courses, and the phrase I hate, it depends. It does depend on what your organization needs from you. But what I would say is you would have to repeat from scratch if you decide to go down to a lower level. So this is one of the areas that it's worthwhile putting the thought in what you might want, because you can roll these up. If you do them at the account, the subscription level, you can create your business units out of those. That's easy, even if you only ever report on those. If you ever need to go lower, it's easy. But if you only start at the higher level, you'd actually have to do the whole reforecast process. So this is one that's worth thinking about in advance, because evolving on from it is actually retracing your steps. But you'll see the mix. But generally, as you evolve, you will go into more level of granularity, because then that gives you the opportunity to do all of them. Can you take me on to the next one, please? And then the final one we're sharing with you today is about how often you actually run your forecast cycle or your process. How often are you updating them? We spoke about what period you were forecasting for, but then, you know, we see people who they do their forecast for a year or 3 years, and they do it once a year. That's not great. You'll see here that in the run state, they're doing it at least monthly. What I will say is that the runners that answered our survey mostly chose the other option. So that's why they're not sort of coming up as weekly, and these aren't in time order, they're in alphabetical. No, just go with that. But the runners were saying that they had on-demand forecasts. So they had tooling in place that could create your current forecast at that point in time, almost press of a button type thing. So whenever you want it, whether it was monthly or at that date in the month or weekly. But you can see by far the majority are monthly, and that's probably a good place to start. At least review cycle them monthly. It's quite a lot of overhead though. So, and it also depends how good they are and how much review they need. If they're really poor, they need more regular review, but you can chip away at it. And this is something that you can work up to. This is something that you could start quarterly or even 6 months, and then you could break down the time slots. You don't have to rework. Okay, can you take me on to the next slide? So now, as part of our survey, Ashley mentioned it, we followed up with some of our runners and some of the interesting responses that we got. And we've got 3 fabulous people with us today to delve in a bit more on their stories. So we're going to kick off with the lovely Dieter. Over to you, Dieter.
Hey everyone, I'm Dieter Mason. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I have been doing cloud FinOps since 2013 at companies like Google, Netflix, Intuit, and most recently Roku. At Roku, we spent about 100 million annually on Amazon Web Services, 20 million on GCP, and about 2 million on Azure. We use a driver-based in-house system that forecasts at the cloud SKU or stock keeping unit level about 4 years out. Let me walk you through how this looks like. Next slide, please. So the business defines business drivers, things like streaming hours, active accounts, ad revenue, and build versions. Build versions are for players' operating system builds. These are then forecasted by the business 4 years out, twice a quarter, on the first month of the quarter and the last month of the quarter. Our forecasting system maps tag combinations that uniquely identify workloads to business drivers. For example, a database may grow with active accounts, while a web service may grow with streaming hours. Our system generates cloud forecasts daily at 6:30 p.m. so that fresh forecasts are available the next morning. Cloud workload owners upload estimates about new workloads and usage optimizations whenever these become available. We review actual versus forecast with the finance team on a monthly basis. We follow up with the workload owners on any substantial over or underspend. Occasionally, we find certain drivers that are not a good fit for the actual growth where we need to adjust the forecasting algorithm. Next slide, please. Thank you. Here we see the architecture of our driver-based forecasting system. On the top left, we use a simple SQL client to input business drivers and new projects, as well as rate and usage optimization. The main table that maps drivers to cloud tags is relatively small, about 3,800 rows. On the bottom left, we ingest the AWS cost and usage report via Athena. In the middle, we see Apache Airflow, which is our batch processing system. Tasks within Airflow, so-called directed acyclic graphs, or DAGs for short, process the billing data and apply the drivers to individual workloads to build the cloud forecasts. The forecasts are then stored in Amazon Redshift, where we use Google Looker as our data visualization tool. The same forecasts also are written to our data lake, where we can run ad hoc queries using Apache Superset. We just started integrating GCP into the system and have no plans for Azure as our spend is still relatively low. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dieter. Appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and pass over to Brad next.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dieter. Love that content. Saw them in the chat. Everyone's taking screenshots. That was amazing diagram. Thanks everyone for having me today. Share a bit about what we're doing at Point Click Care. So very similar to Dieter, doing those 3-year-long forecasts. We're down at that resource group level, and we're focusing on driver-based forecasting along with dabbling with some machine learning. Next slide, please. I wanted to kind of focus on something a little bit different and give everyone a sense of what our journey and maturity and our maturation with forecasting has been. So we've got a little bit of a progression here from the cloudy days to the sunny future. So I'll take that next transition, please. And one more, I always like to start in year 0, which was really a very junior and part-time FinOps team. And we were focused on trend-based with what I call the very obvious drivers. And this was at the start of our migration. So our drivers were really, what were we migrating next? Focused on monthly and year-to-go forecasts for our total cloud spend. And yeah, our accuracy was poor, and beyond two months, not very great. When we get into year 1, we are like firmly embedded in Azure. We are running in the cloud, and we attempted our forecasting just as we did in the colo. And this was a really big learning experience for us. when we hit a budget crisis, when finance's forecasts were different than FinOps's forecasts, and that put leadership at odds and caused some consternation. And really the heart of the problem there was we didn't understand who was spending what where, and we had no way to allocate those costs or to make those allocations visible to the business unit or the business units that needed them. And so forecasting here, started to become a little more nuanced. And we started adding what we called the puts and takes to those trends. And this was really tracking projects, cost savings initiatives, and other Azure service costs and trends. Perfect. Hitting year 2, this is when we really hit our stride. We built a homegrown tool that supports product budgets and forecasts and allows teams to allocate resource costs to specific products, projects, services, components, budget owners, and cost centers. This really gives us all of that allocation and all that context that's unique to our organization so that we can get the right data to the right people. Forecasting continues to be driver-based and remains manual. However, we started dabbling with Meta's Prophet AI and adding that prediction-based data as part of those forecasts. Let's go ahead. Perfect. Year 3. This is ahead of us. We talk about FinOps Nirvana. This is perhaps our Nirvana state for forecasting here at Point Click Care. We are providing AI-generated predictions to budget owners so they have evidence-based starting lines for their forecasts. Budget owners then adjust with their planned variables, and our goal is to focus on per product forecasting accuracy as much as the top line. So this has been our journey, and I hope you're on either side of that or somewhere in the middle. Love to chat with you. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Brad. Really appreciate you sharing your story, and especially you coming from Azure. We love your perspective here.
Thanks.
Go ahead, pass it over to Michelle.
Thanks, Brad, and thanks, Ashley. For me, I'll be sharing with you from my previous experience from the previous organization I was working with. It's a utility provider in Hong Kong, and we were on the run phase, and we do the forecasting mainly because of the fiscal annual budget, and also we revisit it on a monthly basis. We do it on the resource level and application level. So next slide, please. Thank you. So today I'll be sharing with you the different personas or roles that were involved in the forecasting. So the FinOps team, or we call them cloud overall FinOps, and they managed from a governance perspective, the budgeting and forecasting. We use a tool which is Cloud Health for the forecasting, and because in Cloud Health you can take a 12 months forecast, but we do export it in the Excel. That's the way the organization works. We find it more effective because not everyone have access to the Cloud Health. But then we have different teams involved. Once we have the forecast, we have system custodians who review what we shared to them. All the applications, normally, some of them have like varied utilization, they change, they fluctuate every now and then. So it was very important that we get the system custodians input. We don't rely only on the tool. And of course, the system custodians also work closely with the business. They understand what is the upcoming workload, what are the new initiatives, if there's any marketing campaign that's happening. That's why system custodians are very important. Then we also have system owners, or in other terms, these are the business units or the product owners. They endorse our forecast, and of course, they provide any new requirements, and they're also accountable for seeking budget, and they are basically the budget owner. We also have other teams like finance and vendor management. Finance basically because the budget governance sits with finance team, and they track the cloud spend. In terms of vendor management, we get them involved if there are commitment-based discounts that's happening or any contractual negotiations. That's why it's also important to have all these teams part of the forecasting process. With the executive management, we report to them on a monthly governance cadence. We get them involved in terms of any decision-making if there are teams that are over budget or their forecast is way below. And this is why we get the executive management involved. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons learned from our forecasting process, it's really a journey. We have to get everyone involved. As I mentioned, all those different personas needs to be involved, and they really need to understand the process. Although we have this amazing third-party vendor tool, but it's just a tool, it's just one source of input. We still need system custodians and system owners and all of these personas to be involved in the process. And the other thing that we also learned from a 2 years or 3 years journey is we need to put a buffer in terms of our forecasting schedule. Even if we send it in advance, we still keep going in terms of getting reminders. And we also need to make sure we just don't send them an empty Excel spreadsheet, because it's very hard to get input from them. So it's very important that we give the forecast way in advance to them, and then they can review it, they can update it, they can confirm, or they can change it. Also, collaboration and engage. I think that's really the key thing when we do the forecasting. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Michelle. I have to give a shout out to Michelle because she's coming from us from Hong Kong, so it's very early in her morning, and she also was up. Well, she'd be up at her morning time, my evening time. We were teaching the class last night, so she's been full on FinOps for the last 24 hours. So big shout out, Michelle, for that. Allison, what's next?
Thanks. So in the survey, we also asked, our final question is, what are your pain points? Because we want to direct the work that we're doing in the working group. So these are some of the key ones. I'm not going to go through them. I'm trying to catch up a couple of minutes on time, but come to the breakout, the forecasting breakout, where we're going to talk pain points and share your experiences if any of these resonate with you. But just before I move on, I'd like to do a heartfelt thanks to everybody in the working group, everybody that's provided insight and guidance, and most especially to Michelle, Brad and Dieter. And I was going to say the same thing. It's almost midnight where Michelle is. So a big thank you, Michelle, because your story needed to be heard. On to the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Perfect. So if you're wondering how to get more involved, we do have a chat channel called Chat Forecasting. Please go ahead and join that. Tell us what you want us to be solving. Tell us if you've got a user story that you can share. You can also contact one of the contributors that we showed if you actually want to get part of the working group. They're just going into their sprint 2. They're working heavily on that playbook. We will be publishing the survey stuff out to the website shortly. We would like to keep it open till the end of the month. So if you could help us out and take that survey, it's 14 questions. It's pretty quick. So let's kind of jump into this right away. I know we got to get some time cut up here. I want to introduce Anthony Johnson from Box. He has been leading this working group. Why don't you kick us off and tell us a little bit about what your focus has been?
Hey, thanks, appreciate it. So welcome to the Unit Economics Working Group, and more specifically, Cloud Unit Economics. We've kind of made a little bit of a shift in that so that we can be clear on kind of what we're looking at. Very excited. We've had dozens of contributors over the last, what we're developing as best practices, really focused on creating definition, understanding for what Cloud Unit Economics is. And what's interesting, we also had a survey, and we'll be talking a little bit more about it, but over 50% of the people are just starting or have been doing unit economics and cloud, specifically Cloud Unit Economics. But 50%, around 50% have not. And the reasons why is because there's not a clear understanding within the organization, or they have no support, or they have bad data or not enough data to really figure that out. So, you know, I highly encourage you to go to our survey and contribute to that so we can get more clear on how we want to focus on developing our white paper, which we have a little bit of a conversation about that now, as well as really defining how we want to approach this moving forward as a practice.
Perfect. Thanks, TJ. And so to make this a little bit more interactive, we do have a Menti survey that we'd like to pull up right now. We'd love you all to, if you can scan the QR code, go to menti.com and put this code in and answer this question. What do you believe is the goal of unit economics? We made it easy and we gave you 3 options to choose from. Let's jump into Eric. Why don't you go ahead and cover what is Cloud Unit Economics, and then we can pull that up later. We'll discuss it more in the breakout as well.
Thank you, everybody, for your patience. Yeah. This is like always a test and an interesting community experiment. We've got this many people, so
this is how we know this is a lively community, because there's always some interesting things going on here. So there has been just an enormous amount of activity. Great group of folks, as TJ was talking about, in the working group. And one of the big questions that we've heard from folks is a pretty simple one. Just what is Cloud Unit Economics, right? There's been a lot of conversation about what that is, what's the purpose, how do you do it, why should you do it? And we set out to try to answer a lot of those questions in the white paper. But what I wanted to cover for everyone and represent the group here is just to focus in on what this is. Sometimes it's a little elusive. I already saw someone asking that question earlier in the chat, how they get at this. So from a very simple, straightforward point, what I want everyone to take away from this today is to think about cloud unit economics as a system to maximize profit or value, right? Thinking about the investment that you're making in the cloud, how do you turn that into a return on that investment? And cloud unit economics is a specific focused discipline in the space of the cloud on achieving that. And there's a lot of outcomes that you can get out of that. It fits into a lot of things. Now, of course, we like how unit economics was defined as the nirvana in the very first edition of the FinOps book, but I like the evolution of this topic because it does fit into a lot of things. It helps people quantify just in general your FinOps goals across your organization. It can help you calculate how those cloud engineering and operating decisions you're making contribute overall to the return on your investment or your gross profit margin. It can get you in a better place to make better data-driven decisions and maximize that return. And it even has a role to play in forecasting. And the team in the working group is looking forward to reaching out to the forecasting working group in the future and working with them. So all of these noble goals, they're achieved through understanding unit cost metrics specific to the development and delivery of your software, and combining that with unit revenue metrics. Then you can start to understand, am I breaking even? Am I making a profit? Is this investment that I'm making in the cloud actually moving my business forward? That's what cloud unit economics is all about.
Perfect.
So, do we have the survey? We wanted to throw that into the mix here. I wonder if
it is working and it is up. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
I think we'll go ahead and share that. And Eric, maybe give us your take on what you're seeing here. Let me switch screens.
I can do a play-by-play as we get there we go.
Jerry, you're in presenter mode, so I can't present, but y'all are seeing it coming in live right now.
There we go. Awesome. Oh, okay. All right. So did everybody get the link? Did that drop in the channel while I was talking? Oh yeah, looks excellent. All right. So we had 3 questions, or kind of 3 things that we wanted to see people's reaction to. You know, what do you collectively, this community, all 800 of you right now, believe is the goal of unit economics? And we had 3 things there: better cost attribution, driving engagement with engineering, or understanding things like gross margins. And this is, you know, very interesting to us to see, you know, what's driving your interest in this topic. But I want to see if we can't get a couple more entries on this. And Ashley, you let me know when we should cut everyone off.
Yeah, I think that's good. We'll kind of keep that open, kind of collect it, and then we'll publish this at the end. I would just say that if you thought that survey was fun, we also did a survey for the unit economics group. Yeah. They put together 23 questions. We had about 49 responses. Another call to action here: the survey will still stay open until the end of the month. And what the team has now, the working group team has now done, is started to go through that and start to analyze the results, and it's starting to help them form, or at least started to form their draft playbook. So TJ, what was the survey finding that you found the most interesting?
I think it was more about desired outcomes, and really it's kind of tied to a maturity of how we develop these specific cloud unit economics. And you know, when we look at this, we look at a lot of engineering focused, and kind of this is kind of the easy part of, dare I say, unit economics, is a lot of the initial early maturity is focused on engineering kind of focus, and then we move more toward finance type focus, and then we eventually move to a business type of focus. And so, you know, these desired outcomes move from a languaging perspective, from engineering speak to business speak at some point during your maturity. And so it's just really interesting to look at kind of the desired outcomes that people are looking for from unit economics, and kind of where it measured and what they were looking for today, right? And that speaks directly to the 50% kind of starting and using unit economics that I spoke about earlier, and the 50% that still are trying to figure out what they're doing with them.
That's great. And this has all helped us start drafting a white paper. So Eric, tell us a little bit more about that process and where we're at.
Yeah, so starting from that definition and working our way through all those topics. Why should people do this? When should they get involved? How do we define all the terminology and topics in this? That all came together with the working group for the white paper. And you can view the output of the current draft version right there in the link on the screen. And I encourage everyone to check it out. Our next steps are to continue to evolve this. We actually have a ton of work ahead of us, super exciting stuff on this topic. We're going to try to break out into focus areas where we can get at some of the user stories and personas for people that are pursuing unit economics, some of the types of unit cost metrics that make a great sense to start with, as well as how it might fit in with forecasting. We also have some interesting ideas that were brought up around the public sector and how unit economics fits in there as well. So we want to develop those key personas and industries, and you'll see that start to come together in the unit economics white paper that you see published there on the link on the screen. Really love how all that content came together. And of course, it didn't all come together with just a few people. There was a big group working on this. So content's live, and we encourage everyone to check it out. Let us know. We've got our chat channel for the unit economics group. We'd love to hear your feedback.
I'm just kind of showing it on the screen, and then there's also an option that you can make suggestions and contribute there, or do that via the chat channel as well.
Oh yeah, I don't forget about that tiny little make suggestion button on that page. Actually, it's super helpful.
I heard Eric hinted this a bit in the, and he was saying in the first book, it was saying that this was the nirvana, but that's actually one of the things we're changing in the next book, which is that unit economics and metrics and all those things are really just like a means to an end to better decision making, right? And it's one thing you look at to make better decisions, and that's, I think, where we're talking more folks where it seems to be going. So
ultimately, the FinOps nirvana is all about making better decisions, right? And I love how unit economics supports that in such a big way. So this is just some of the contributors and folks have worked together on in this working group. Actually, I think this has been just a ton of very active participants. So a huge shout out to everyone on this list, everyone who's participated. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, so many contributors, we needed 2 slides, so absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Again, survey is still open. You can see the playbook online, and then please join Chat Unit Economics if you're interested in this topic. For the sake of speeding up time, we're going to move to the containers cost allocation. This is probably going to sound familiar to some of you if you came to FinOpsX or you were on the previous March summit. This is their 3rd appearance because they have been one of our longest standing working groups. They actually started August this last year, so an entire year, and I think they've now wrapped up 3 sprints. So huge shout out to them. I want to turn it over to David Sturds from Mindcurve and Bala from Aptio, who have really been leading this work. But I just have to give a shout out to these individuals that have been along this journey for this last 12 months as well. Take it away, David.
All right, hi folks, thanks for introducing Ashley. Yeah, happy to be here. It has been a long journey now for 1 year. You may wonder why, and we will show you why. So container cost allocation triggers a lot of discussion, and people are not always clear where to start, and this is exactly what the working group that was born out of the 6 containers. Now it's called Chat Containers Kubernetes. You can join us there, was born out. So, and while we believe there's a lot of good content at the FinOps website around container cost allocation and Kubernetes, FinOps Kubernetes, we believe that there's something missing, which are deliverables that are ready to use. And this is what the working group was focusing about. And we published in March an opinionated FinOps label schema that you can look up. And today we wanted to show you what we published on the website. And we welcome all personas of all majorities to comment, to contribute. What we pushed out here, because it's just one variant, and we learned that there are many views on these things, and you really need to make up your own label schema. So for this, to get the working group started, this is a small recap here, and we started with a use case that might be familiar with many of you. You have a shared container platform running where many teams deploying their applications and products on. So we wanted to make sure to cover all personas within the use case. And there is also a label schema that has been developed for this scenario. And so for my personal learning, there has been a label schema needs to also be evolve over time. And there are many. And what we did is exactly that. We collected many label schemas across the community. And here you see a screenshot of different label schemas that has been provided by either vendors and FinOps platform Thank you for that again. And from the community from individual practitioners. And we created a top, let's say, top 10 list of that, and we matched this to different personas. And this has been, you can all see this in very detail on the March Summit recording. But today is more about what we done for this and how did we open up this for contribution. And I would like to hand over to Bala.
Thanks, David. So since we're running tight on time, I'll give a quick overview on the evolution of this project and the 3 major sprints. To start the content creation, we ran a survey last year within the practitioner community to understand the challenges when it came to the container cost allocation. And based on the feedback received, we worked on the user story that David just updated. So once that was finalized, we started gathering feedback from the working group on the different personas that would be the key for this use case, their objectives, the key metrics they would be interested. And then we sat through a lot of working group sessions to see how we could leverage the Kubernetes labels to align cost for those metrics. Our goal, as Ashley mentioned, was to provide on what should be the best approach or per se the best practice adoption when it comes to label schema. So once we had all that information gathered and aligned internally with the contributing members, we gave a preview in our March Summit. So I would consider that as our first sprint. The second sprint was the FinOps conference in Austin. So after the March Summit, we worked on the framework to merge all these label schemas into a label dictionary for easier consumption by the community. We then published this work to the FinOps GitHub for others to refer, validate, and contribute, since this is an iterative approach. The GitHub contributors were announced during the Container Chalk Talk at the FinOps conference, and that's the second major sprint. But the third and the major evolution for us is the update being made today. The Container Working Group is very happy to announce that all the effort they have put in the last few months to create the best practice guide for label schema is now officially published to the FinOps website for all our community members to consume. So please take a look, review, and provide feedback. Now we can actually, Ashley, do we want to share the website or?
Yep, I'm going to go ahead and just show it to you also. Same thing previously where it's listed under the project, and then the page is officially launched. If you guys want to talk through a little bit how to navigate it, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I would say let's pick one of the personas. So Bala, which one would you,
I think I'll go for, I'll do an engineer for a difference today, yeah.
All right, so in which maturity would you like to take on?
I would say walk.
All right. So what you can see here now is that the recommendations here would be that environment and customer would be a label schema that we considered for work maturity for engineers to allocate their costs. And if you don't like the word environment, but rather have it stage or env, you might find it in the aliases. So they can already end with some examples. Okay, let's add one more persona, Ashley. Which one would you take, Ashley?
Let's pull finance in.
All right, finance. Okay, so what you can see here now is that the label schema growth, right? So beside the one from the engineer, we also got some more that we consider for the maturity of work for the finance people. And this is what we put up on the website so that you can discover. And please just take a look. And we put this out for, we believe, for each and every context in Kubernetes, for example, to label your costs across maturities and personas.
Perfect, that's great. So yeah, please go there and check it out. And to kind of cover this, how we got started, but you will want to use this website as a resource to reference with your labeling and maybe take a look at what you may not have included in your Kubernetes or your container labeling as well. Again, this working group has worked so hard and they are just wrapping up. They love to talk about this, so please join them in the chat, Containers Kubernetes, if you have any questions. You can also submit a user story by going up to the top of the website and doing that, or reaching out to one of the members. I would just also say this is a great opportunity to share this on socials. They've worked really hard on this, and we'd love to celebrate that win for them. All right, we'll take a quick breather and we'll move into our very last working group today, which is the sustainability working group. You've heard from them a couple times, and so I would just want to give these people a particular shout out because they are a wealth of knowledge. I always tell people when I hear the word sustainability, I get a little bit intimidated and excited at the same time. And I think there's a reason behind that. And there's just so much to know in this area, just like there is in FinOps. And both Bingu and Mark have jointly been leading this working group. And I have to say they're setting records because they give themselves deadlines and they've been like exceeding them by week. So kudos to them. And I'll turn it over to Mark to really talk about what Sprint 0 and 1 objectives were.
Hello, everyone. So yeah, we're at the point where we've completed our first two sprints, so Sprint 0 and Sprint 1. Sprint 0 was very much the baseline, which was to try and give us some clarity on the subject matter in the first place, to get us to a point where we actually understood what the vision was for the working group and what the link was between FinOps and what's now been known as GreenOps. We also wanted to do something because to give some actual hard deliverables for practitioner members. So we came up with a list of known kind of GreenOps remediation examples that are linked to FinOps. So the kind of savings that will actually help you reduce your carbon footprint of your services. And critically, obviously, give ourselves a high level framework for our next 3 sprints. And to be clear, we see this as being an ongoing working group that is not going to stop anytime soon. We've already got about another 10 to 12 sprints planned with key deliverables underway in the background. So if you want to go on to Sprint 1. So Sprint 1 actually came out of feedback from members of the foundation, which was they got fed up with us throwing around sustainability terms that no one actually understood what they meant, why they were relevant, and why they should care. So we've come up with an overarching glossary of terms, and we've tried to link these back into the variety of FinOps personas as well, and linking that back into GreenOps. So it gives some clarity overall. And as you can see, there is a link to the website there, which you can now find all the content on. You can see where we are. And the key point with sustainability and FinOps is that it's very much like the Wild West right now. There is no real consistency. There are no hard and fast standards, and it is developing extremely fast. And the key point here is sustainability is going to start hitting all the other lovely, wonderful working groups as well, because it links into forecasting, it links into billing, it links into unit economics. Everything will be linked together as companies start focusing more and more on the carbon footprint of their digital services.
Thanks, Mark. I think looking at this glossary resonates of why I feel so intimidated. So I'm so happy to have this resource guide that I can go ahead and reference. The next year we were going to do the Menti, but I know we're having some difficulties with that. A lot of people did fill it out, so I figured we'll just share the results real quick. Bindu, what do you think about what you're seeing here?
Not surprised. So when we were going through our working group every week, we noticed we have new folks joining in, and this is what we see. So really not surprised, Ashley.
Perfect. Why don't you give us a little bit more direction on what you feel as a practitioner community we can take back to our organizations?
Yeah, sure. I think to your organization, first of all, identify the driver, right? What is your organization driver to kickstart the sustainability program? Now, there could be that there is already a sustainability program ongoing, so go and join them and understand their OKRs, understand what are their key objectives for next quarter, next year, and such. If not, identify yourself, what are your customer asking? Because we do see that customer demand, that what are your sustainability goals? If you're a smaller organization looking for investing, sometimes investment firms ask, how are you incorporating sustainability into your business goals? Apart from that, we have also noticed that employees are demanding it. Now, that's not at all a financial motivation. It's all personal. So that is something new that we have noticed, and it has a global impact rather than just the cost impact in an organization. So all in all, sustainability is impactful and it's well received. Now, once you have a charter defined for an organization through the driver, how do you go about starting the practice? Is what we have referred in Sprint 0. Look into that. There is a whole Excel spreadsheet on remediation examples at a very high level for go through usage optimization, eliminate unused and underutilized resources, go through your software architecture and try to see where you can use serverless, go through your compute hardware, how can you utilize minimum hardware to get your job done, look at your development and deployment and testing workloads, that how you can not use compute wherever not needed. And last but not the least is the data patterns, how you can reduce the redundant data and such. And at the same time, start thinking about the KPIs that you would measure, especially for carbon footprint and the dashboard that you want to see. There is also going on to the step 2 is how do you, once you have established kind of best practice and the methodology, how do you go about calculating those carbon footprints? So from the major cloud service providers, AWS, Google, and Microsoft, they have their tools that they provide that we can utilize to measure. And I think we are going to put it on the channel chat. Yes, thank you. And one recommendation that we would make as part of the working group is use the carbon footprint calculator. Also, it is cloud agnostic, and it is also at the same time, it is the word biased I want to use here. So I would recommend that once you have calculated through cloud service provider, also run your calculation through cloud carbon footprint, just to see what are the gaps, how similar your results are, and what are not. And develop very early on KPIs on your calculation. Go and start developing early dashboard. And going on to number 3 is continuously monitoring it and continuously improving it. Is you want to go now and measure the KPIs at a deep down level, like at an application level, rather than at the whole cloud infrastructure of your organization. You want to develop a personalized dashboard for a department, like say, business wants to see at a very high level that they can, put it on company's website of your carbon footprint. The finance wants to see it at each of the product level, whereas the engineering wants to see it at an application level. So those are, the starting points. If you want to move on to the next slide.
I think for the sake of time, we're going to take the sustainability adoption roadmap, and we'll have that kind of kick off the working group we'll have it kick off the breakouts that we want to get started here in a second. So again, find the sustainability chats, go ahead and share the win of the website that's been launched, and they are starting sprint 3. So there's a call of action if you're very interested in this. Join the weekly calls that are on Fridays, and then come on over to the break room. We'll talk about this a little bit further. This is just another recap of all of the events that we have going on. And if you've heard all of these wonderful things from the working groups and you're thinking, I want to get involved, or this has inspired an idea, just to let you know that you can submit an idea at any time. If you go into the projects page at FinOps.org, you fill out this form, tells me your ideas, tells if you want to lead it. That goes to the TAC and the F2 staff, and we get that slotted and get interest to get those started. And we're definitely looking for some ideas going into this fall. Once again, just thank you all the working groups. They worked tirelessly over this summer. Some of them were doing working group stuff while they were on vacations. And I think that just speaks to how much they love what they're doing. And we appreciate all the volunteer time as well.
JR here from the FinOps Foundation. Thank you for watching. Please go to FinOps.org if you want to get plugged into this amazing community. And of course, hit subscribe right here on YouTube to get all the future content. Hope to see you soon.